You're gonna do great.
Hello everybody. So now we're going to begin my capstone presentation, and for my topic it is the effects of colorism in TV on the viewer's perception of African Americans. So here is the order of the presentation in which we will do today. First we will go on with the introduction, the purpose of the study, the study's relevance, terms, the objectives, my research questions, our panelists' introductions, the research methods which I used, my findings, my recommendations, questions, and my abstract. So first, here's an introduction. My name is Ariel. I'm a senior here at Delaware State University, and I'm studying mass communications with a concentration in public relations and advertising. I am from Waldorf, Maryland, and I plan to obtain my Bachelor of Arts degree in mass communications in May of 2023, May 12th to be specific. I am a proud member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, and I currently serve as the Vice President for the duration of the 2022-2023 academic school year for the Upsilon chapter at Delaware State University. I am also a passionate baker, and I have my own baking business called Sweets with Ree, at Sweets with Ree on Instagram. I research how the effects of colorism in television affects the viewer's perceptions of African Americans. The study will analyze the stereotypic depictions created by colorism in TV, as well as gain more insight into its effects in today's society. This is especially relevant due to the fact that television and the media are where most people form their opinions of others. So therefore, we will need to examine this. So again, what is the purpose of this study and this presentation? Well, the purpose of this study and presentation is to examine how the effects of colorism in TV has affected the viewer's perceptions of African Americans, as well as how it has impacted it. Again, this study and presentation will analyze the stereotypic depictions created by colorism in television, as well as gaining more insight into the effects that it has had on society. What is the relevance of this study? The relevance of this study was to determine how the depictions of colorism in television affected the viewer's perceptions of African Americans. This is especially crucial to viewers, especially people who are not members of the Black community, due to the fact that television and the media are where most people form opinions of others. So therefore, we need to examine how colorism has affected these viewers. Terms. These are some of the terms that were used in this study and that will be used throughout this presentation. I will define these terms to ensure that there is no misuse. African Americans. The term African American will be used throughout this presentation. An African American is defined by the Collins Dictionary as Black people living in the United States who are descended from families that originally came from Africa. Colorism. The term colorism will also be used throughout this presentation. Colorism is defined as the practice of favoring lighter skin over darker skin. The preference for lighter skin can be seen within any racial or ethnic background. Effect. Effect is defined as an impression that someone creates deliberately, for example, in a place or piece of writing. Perception. A perception is defined by Collins Dictionary as something is the way that you think about it or the impression that you have of it. So what were this study's objectives? The first objective is to analyze the effects of colorism in TV on the viewer's perceptions of African Americans. The second objective is to review how the colorism within TV creates stereotypic depictions of African Americans. The third objective, to determine the relevance of colorism and the stereotypic depictions in our current society. And the fourth objective, is to propose better ways to prevent the negative effects of colorism within TV. These are the research questions that I used within my research paper throughout my research, as well as some of the questions that I used for my focus group, which I will talk about later in the presentation. The first question, how has the display of colorism in TV affected the viewer's perceptions of African Americans? Question 2, how do viewers of television feel that colorism has created stereotypic depictions of African Americans? Question 3, are colorism and these stereotypic depictions relevant in our current society? Question 4, What are some better proposals to prevent these negative effects of colorism within TV? These are the panel introductions. My first panelist is Raven Quander. Raven Quander is currently a junior at Delaware State University, majoring in mass communications. She is also a filmmaker. My second panelist, who is joining us via FaceTime, is Zakaya Mackey. Zakaya Mackey is a senior psychology major at Delaware State University with the goals and aspirations to work with adolescents and young adults with their transition into adulthood. These are the research methods that I use to conduct my research. Number 1, content analysis. According to Mike Allen of the Sage Encyclopedia of Communication Research Methods, content analysis is a systemic, quantitative approach to analyzing the content or meaning of communicative messages. Content analysis is a descriptive approach to communication research, and as such is used to describe communicative phenomenon. 2, focus groups. Focus groups are defined by the Tegan George of Scriber as a research method that brings together a small group of people to answer questions in a moderated setting. The group is chosen due to predefined demographic traits, and the questions are designed to shed light on a topic of interest. These were my research findings. So from the content analysis, these were my findings. Many of these depictions showcase dark-skinned women as aggressive and not as pretty as the lighter-skinned women in the shows, and showcase the darker-skinned men in the shows as dumb, violent, and scary. The depictions of light-skinned women, the depictions of light-skinned men show them as less masculine and not black enough, and more sensitive. They also showcase the light-skinned women as bougie and better than everyone else. So with this data, that means that with the data listed, 77.78% of the characters in the listed TV shows on the graph, which you can see on the right here, have stereotypic depictions, and most of them are women. This also shows that many of the colorism depictions within these TV programs are geared towards women rather than men. Also, that 57% of the stereotypical depictions of women from the data listed were geared towards darker skinned women rather than light skinned women. And also, again, if you look to the right, here's the graph for my content analysis, and these were the shows that I used to do my content analysis. I used Martin, Blackish, Meet the Browns, and Family Reunion. The TV shows that were used in the content analysis along with the character roles of said characters, the gender, and the positive or negative connotation that is associated with their character. Most of the characters had negative roles rather than positive ones associated with their stereotypic depiction of colorism and their skin tone within the TV show that they featured in. These were the findings from my focus group. The participants of my focus group were chosen through Instagram by conducting a poll asking for those who have been viewers of TV shows with depictions of African Americans. I then went through the participants who took this poll and chose people from different ages, different tones, as well as different genders to participate in the focus group that would take place on Zoom. There were 10 participants in total that ranged in age and gender. A lot of recurring themes in this focus group were that people want to see the correct casting for TV shows, wanting equal screen time for every complexion, and wanting the better treatment of dark-skinned actors and actresses within the television industry. Another theme throughout this focus group was that many participants within the focus group talk more about the treatment of dark-skinned women in TV rather than darker men. Also, a lot of the participants agreed that colorism depictions in TV definitely do have an effect on viewers that watch them, especially viewers that are not members of the Black community. Here are my recommendations after finding what I found within my research. The conclusion that I have in this study is that there are a lot of colorist depictions that are based on stereotypes that are portrayed within television. This shows that there is a bias in the television industry to lighter-skinned actors and actresses rather than the darker-skinned ones. My recommendation is for the directors and others within the television industry to start being more equal to lighter and darker actors and actresses. Also, give them the same screen time and privileges as the lighter ones. Additionally, help both complexions to work together rather than against each other. Questions? And could you react to what you just...
Let's have Sunday respond to some of the questions you heard.
Yeah, so again, I'm Raven. Hi. It's very frustrating with the different types of stereotypes that the media has projected onto people. And, you know, after a long time of just seeing it, if you see it from a young age, you're going to get older, and those are going to become the views that you internalize with yourself and see on other people. So it'll be a lot of times where people are like, oh, well, you're light skinned, you must be really bougie. And it's like, no, not at all, kind of awkward actually. So, or you must have some frustrations against darker tone women than yourself. And it's like, not at all. I don't really care at all, actually. I feel like the content of someone's character is way more important than whatever they look like. You could be the prettiest person in the world and be ugly inside, or you could be the quote unquote ugliest person in the world and actually be really talented and really kind and all of those things. So I feel like it's a very important conversation to have with people, to discuss pretty privilege, if that's a real thing, why it's not just for one person or the other between genders at all, and pretty much how the media has affected people's self-confidence and how they view each other.
Zakaya, do you have any responses to what we just spoke about?
Yes, I definitely do agree. Like, growing up watching a lot of different TV shows, there would never be a darker skinned like actress in the role of a character for long, and mid-season they'll switch them out. And growing up like as a darker skinned like kid, it was very like hard to like find like people growing up and like finding role models. But seeing how like media has changed now, they are bringing more awareness to having darker skinned like actresses in bigger roles, and they're becoming more like inclusive, where they're not always in a position of always dealing with like hurt or trauma. They're like getting happy endings.
Okay. All right, let me take over from there. Thank you, family members, for coming, and I hope that we'll gain a thing or two from Ariel's presentation. Now, let me situate the research in what we know best in academia, which is theory. Right? There's what we call the reflection hypothesis theory of the media, and there is the creation hypothesis of the media. Or we can say reflection and affect theories of the media. Let me explain what these are. We say that the media do reflect society. Therefore, we cannot blame the media for accentuating, for reinforcing societal norms and societal cultural expectations or cultural biases. So then, this discrimination against darker colors is not the making of television. It is embedded in our society. That's part one. Now, can we blame the media for now reinforcing, accentuating? Maybe that's where the problem comes from. So before I go on, can you react to that? That the media probably not to blame. They're just reinforcing, they're just reflecting what we already have in society.
Well, you know, as I previously stated, a child that's 3 doesn't know anything but, okay, this is a person, I'm a person too, or that's an animal. If you constantly show them things that it's like, okay, because you look like this, you should be acting like this, or you should be treated like this. That's going to reinforce it in their head that I should feel like this, even though I don't truly believe that. And after a long time of establishing that with them, they're not going to know anything other than that. So in some circumstances, yeah, the media is to blame, because some children don't really have parents that are going to correct them on what the media teaches them.
Yeah, that's so smart. You said cleverly that what you show them. She didn't say that what you tell them possibly may cause you to behave that way. So the first contact the child has is with the parents. So the parents tell them, those are black people over there, they're poor, they're aggressive, they're this, they're that. And for us here on the other side of the lake, we are this, we are that, we are that, okay? So the first socialization starts right, from home. Can you take it from there?
Yes, responding to what you spoke. Okay. I definitely agree with what my panelist Raven said, and even to take it to a different side, you spoke about children. Again, even like you just said in the presentation, for people who are not of the black community, if this is the only thing that they're being shown, they're going to automatically feel as though, oh, when I meet a dark-skinned man, he's going to be aggressive and I should clutch my pearls because he's scary. Or when I meet a light-skinned man, he's more emotional and sensitive and he's not as scary. Or when I meet a light-skinned woman, she's going to be so bougie, and when I meet a dark-skinned woman, she's going to be so mean. So I really think it does go back into all which people are watching and what they're shown, because if you're somebody who lives in Iowa and you've never met somebody from the black community before, you're only going to know what you've been shown. And on these television programs, if you're being shown all these stereotypic depictions of colorism, you're going to associate those with people of a community that you've never met.
I agree with you. It's a debate that will continue. But let me also posit that those people in Iowa that we think are so far removed, they have socialization experiences from family members, from leaders in the community who tell them stuff about other races. So it's not just the media. And that takes me to another theory that we call the agenda setting theory of the media. It backs up what you are saying, that of course the media set the agenda for us. So they tell us that lighter skinned people are more acceptable, they even pay them more, you know that, right? They pay them more for roles. And darker people, oh no, they're not worth this, they're not worth that. So we argue that the media will set the agenda of what they show us and how they are framed, right? But then we are now realizing if we are to be truthful, to look at the influence of societies, the sociological influence, so there's cultural determinism, they call it. So the culture is actually setting the agenda for the media to reflect. That is the opposite side of this. So I don't want us to live here with wholesale blame for the media. Okay, we are media practitioners. So we have to reflect what society wants, basically. So where do we take this? Even when we have producers who are black, they still portray black people in a negative light. Why is that so? Yes?
It's pretty much a self-reflection, and it's also what they think that society thinks that they should be showing. Just because you're black, it doesn't make you exempt from bias. And it also doesn't make you exempt from self-hate, hate of people who look like you or don't look like you. And even if you don't show it in everyday conversation, that tension and bias is still there and very much so prevalent.
So are you saying that we are all suffering from Pavlovian
syndrome?
Conditioning.
Yes.
So even though you realize that there are no basic objective differences among the colors, yet you have been programmed yourself, even as a black person, to want to improve the color of your skin. Because there are more black people bleaching their skins today than you can ever imagine. So maybe that's as a result of that conditioning. So society wants me to be this, and for me to succeed, I have to appear this way. So you call it self-hate, do you think?
Yeah, it also comes from a very ethnocentric mentality. So, you know, believing your culture is better than someone else's just because, hey, you've been taught this. Like, we see it very common in America, and we're not the only country who does that. So it's like, okay, well, for people who aren't black, yeah, of course I'm going to think my culture is better than yours. First of all, I've never been exposed to yours and been a part of it. So, yeah, I'm better. And for black people, there is a color spectrum along with us. So it's like, okay, if you're dark skinned, you're going to think, yeah, well, my culture is kind of different from the light skinned culture of other black people because they do this. And it's very uneducated because you're just assuming instead of actually getting to know what that other side does or does not do, or just thinking, okay, well, we're common in this area. It doesn't really mean one is better than the other.
Is there a motivation for this, for the producers, for the media practitioners, to engage in this practice of colorism?
Can you elaborate?
Is there an economic gain for it?
I think it is. I mean, they definitely profit off showing these one-sided versions of characters that they depict. So
why do people continue to patronize these products?
because it's more easily understandable. But what's more easily understandable isn't necessarily more real. It's just the easiest version to get the story plot across.
Is it then possible for a black person to self-negate by promoting something that actually will injure his or her own cultural well-being or even psychological well-being?
Yes.
So the essence of this study then is academically we understand the issues now. What can we do to stem the tide so that I would not grow up, I would not have a graduate of this school now become a big producer who will continue the tradition of denigrating the race. And either of you can
I think it definitely matters, like what parents teach your kids, or I won't just say parents, I'll say guardians or any adult in a child's life. For that child to become educated is first important for whoever's in charge of them to also be educated, because you can't teach someone to be accepting with an ignorant mentality.
Raven is so idealistic, and I like that, okay? So she's talking about parents. Let me tell you what a communication philosopher said, that in the American home, there are three parents. Mom and dad, by assumption, they may not be there. And then social media or television. And he says that the third one is the most potent one. So we are assuming that there are parents there to start with. And we are assuming that the parents are not victims of colorism themselves and that they know better. And even if they do know better, they can intervene in the lives of and perceptions of their children to the extent that they will go against what their peers tell them in schools, in social gatherings, and in general society.
I'm going to agree and disagree with you, because the first person that a child is going to look up to is the older people in their lives, whoever that is, sibling, parent, guardian, whoever. So regardless of what they see on social media, if your guardian or whoever you look up to doesn't negate those feelings, then you're going to continue to believe them. And that comes from a place of care. So if whoever that is does not care enough to be like, hey, what you're facing or what you're seeing, that is not true, that is social media, that comes from an ignorant standpoint, then they're going to continue to believe it. So yes, social media is a great teacher, but we don't just have one teacher for a reason. We have multiple, because teachers can be wrong.
I agree with
A lot of
oh,
times.
Go ahead, please.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Go, Zakaya.
I was going to say a lot of times also people tend to compare things to themselves. So if you're not having somebody that's actually there to teach you right from wrong, they'll just look at things one way. And because of not knowing, they'll continue to believe it. And that's why, like, it's also important for, like, examples when they create books and say the character of the book is supposed to be, is supposed to look some sort of a way, but when they create a movie, they alter the character completely. So for those that may, like, grow up and find, like, oh, wow, like, this person is just like me growing up, okay, I'm going to watch the movie, and then when they see it, it's not the same. So that's another, like, negative role of how the media can play into it, because sometimes they make things too Hollywood instead of keeping it, like, realistic.
I also agree. I agree with what Zakiya just said as well, and I also agree with what Raven said. But with the parental figure, that, like you just said, yes, I get what you're saying, but growing up during the digital age, the age of social media, people's parents have told them a lot of things about don't believe social media. Social media and the media is always going to be, this is my personal opinion, the biggest influence, because it's what your peers are on. It's what society is showing you. So for a lot of people, even if your parents are saying, oh, your skin is beautiful, or don't believe this, if society is telling you this and your peers are telling you this, a lot of people are going to go with and be influenced by what their peers said. And I also think that, I believe previously you said something about the parents. I agree with what you said. I also think that the people who are in these positions right now in college, possibly going to college, and are interested in getting involved with the media, they have to learn things like this too, because it's very critical to know what you're showing the next generation, and even what you're showing this generation, because the media and society is so influential. It doesn't matter if you're 5 years old. It doesn't matter if you're 60 years old. If there's something that is on the media and within the media that is that influencing to you, and you are somebody who is not really set in your ways or set in your opinion, you can get very easily influenced into thinking that, wow, this is, I feel this way about myself now. So I really think that it's up to the media, the people within the media, and the people who are coming up now to really take this as a serious issue, as well as many other things, but especially this, and especially if you're a black person coming into the media, because this is a very prevalent issue within the black community as well, and as well as other communities as well, because as it previously stated, it's not really limited to just the black community. There are people who are a part of the Latinx community that are going through the same thing as well. So I really think that it's up to the people who are coming in the media to really see these as serious issues and say, well, maybe if this person in the book was a dark-skinned young man, we need to cast a dark-skinned young man for the movie, and not just go with, as Zakiya said, making everything so Hollywood.
Example, The Hate U Give.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a prime example.
Yeah, I will never watch that movie because I don't like who they chose for the actress. Like, just because in the book, it was very evident she's dark-skinned for a reason. And for the movie, it's like, okay, yeah, she comes with the name, but there are just as many talented dark-skinned actresses that could have played that role. You did not need to change her whole pigmentation.
So the question is,
I agree
why?
with that 100% from The Hate U Give, because that was very, like, close to home for me. So, like, seeing a movie and they completely changed, like, the way the character looked, that was very, like, upsetting, and it upset a whole lot of people.
So why did they do it in the first place? Why?
That's a good question. And we'll never know, because we don't know whether it's because she came with the name or because they just did not want her to look unapproachable.
Right.
But yeah, the only way you're gonna...
I don't think it's bottom line that you have more white people in this country, 60-some%, and African Americans 12%, Hispanic Americans 14%. So if you want to attract the most audience for your investment, you may want to play to the expectations of that larger number so that you can meet them.
And even with what you're saying, I don't know what slide it was, but even with, that was in the presentation as well. Within colorism, it's always going to make up more, I'm not going to say always, more times than less, the darker skinned people are portrayed as mean and aggressive, and the lighter skinned people are portrayed as more approachable, as Raven said, and more welcoming. So I can definitely see what you're saying as why they would put a light skinned woman, so that instead of putting a dark-skinned woman, because if it was a dark-skinned woman, some of those people, the higher percentages may be like, oh, I don't want to see this movie because it's about somebody who's not really approachable. So it's easier for some percentages and some people to digest if it's a lighter character. So that could be a definite reason why they chose to cast Amandla.
Easier for some people to digest. That is the key right there. That mass audience that will make them the most money, even though that is coming off as denigrating, negative to other people in society. All right, I want to look at some of your recommendations. You said that there should be equal representation or equal screen time. Who is going to ensure that? Who is going to be the screen time police on this movie set, or in the editing rooms, or in the casting boardroom?
I think
it's a great idea, but
right. I think that it would just go back to having people who are in the media who understand the issue, and having directors, producers, and editors who are willing to give both actors and actresses of both tones the same amount of time, as well as the actors and actresses. I understand that they don't want to sometimes make any risks so that they don't get any jobs, but at some point people have to stand together and say that, well, I'm a light-skinned actress or actor, but I know that this part was originally made for a dark-skinned man or woman. I'm not going to take that part. And I've seen it happen before, like even on like Instagram or TikTok. Some actors or actresses will say they didn't take a certain part because they know it wasn't originally created for them. So I feel like it really has to do with the people within the media understanding this issue and starting to kind of like build a safe space.
Okay, just want you to, this is my second last question. Just want you to educate us as to why you think colorism does affect beyond the African American or beyond people of colors or community. So the impact of colorism not only on black people but on the rest of society.
I'll go first. You want me to go? I can go.
I got you. Yeah, so originally, even in Bollywood, it would only ever be lighter skinned Indian women. Why? Because if you're darker skinned, you're considered to be a serf, which is, you don't know, that's like the lowest you can go. So it's like just based off how you look, that determines your social class. If you're lighter skinned, you're in this category. If you're below this, then you're in this category. More prevalently in America, we come from a place where a paper bag test was a thing. You can't just erase that from history, from anything. People are always going to remember it as long as there's a history class, let's be honest. But if you let them know that was not okay, and when we do this today, it has this tone, or it makes us think about when this was happening, that's very important. And especially for people who are not a person of color. So I'm not talking about the Latin community, I'm not talking about the Hispanic community, I'm not talking about Indian, I'm not talking about black. I'm talking about, okay, if you're white, if you're from Poland, if you're from all those places, if you're white, you especially need to take the time to learn racial undertones and why you're not allowed to say certain things or do certain things, or when you do certain things, this is why it gives off this tone. And then for different colors, a part of different communities, it's important to know how someone who's darker than you feels, or someone that's lighter than you, because if you don't care to find out, you're going to go along and say some really offensive things or do some really offensive things that's like, yeah, well, because you didn't care to do your research and say, hey, depicting me like this gives off this impression, is going to continue to happen.
I think that it's important because what you're shown, again, like I know I stated this earlier, but this is really the importance. what you're shown is what you're going to believe most times. Unless you are told different and you know, okay, this is not true, this is just ignorance, you will see something and be like, oh, well, every time I see somebody on TV and they're darker skinned, they're mean, or they're unapproachable, or they seem aggressive, or even like within men on black men in TV. Oh, when he's a dark skinned man, he's the thug, he's the gangster, he's the rapper, and the light skinned man is the R&B singer, and he's nice and he's sensitive. Like, you're going to automatically have these prejudice instilled within you from watching these shows, and you're going to believe that that is really how things are working within this community, when in reality that's a stereotypic depiction that's not always true. For some people that may be true, but there are just as many darker skinned men that are sensitive and nice than there are, just as there are light skinned men, and there's just as many light skinned men who can be portrayed as thugs and mean and aggressive, just as there are dark skinned men. And the same goes with women. So I really think that it's just all about not being ignorant to something and just realizing that what you put in the media is what people are seeing. And for some people, that can be some people from a different community, that can be their first impression of that community. And that's, first impression is always like key.
Well, so in essence, what we are saying here is that as we have in India, there is a known caste system, and everybody knows where he or she belongs. What I'm hearing from you now is that there is a sort of caste system even in the United States. It's called power structure. And that power structure is being maintained by those who have the power and the money and the decisions to cast people who are lighter in order to maintain that power structure. Because those who look like us are better than those who do not. Therefore, we have to cast those who look like us even among them. You see, all those use of derogatory words, us, them, and all. All right, so we have to speak to the power structure in America, so to say. And people do not relinquish power so easily. So we have to thoroughly educate, right?
Right.
We have to thoroughly educate. Isn't that why you are here? You're getting this education, you're enlightened, you're sophisticated, you now see the problem, and you know that those who constitute part of the problem may not be ready and willing to let go of that power. And that takes me to my last question. Okay? What are you going to do with this knowledge? Don't you think there's a need for media literacy program that you can champion and become a speaker across schools, across universities in this country? What do you think? Media literacy.
I think that that's definitely something that would be very useful and that would be needed, because again, people need to be knowledgeable, especially people who are planning to have a career or a future within the media, whether it's public relations or digital media or journalism. Every part of the media affects another part somehow. So I feel like that would be very beneficial for people to learn, because if you don't know and you don't seek that knowledge, or it's not given to you somehow, then you may never know. And you can possibly start to become a part of the problem without even realizing it. So I think that that would be very beneficial.
So you're going to take this show on the road?
I would like to,
Okay.
yeah.
Any last comments from you?
No, I think I said everything.
Sakaya, any last comments?
Nope, I don't have anything.
All right.
Lastly, I'm going to show you on my abstract. So again, this is just going to be reiterating some of the points of the presentation. This study presentation is based on the effects of colorism in TV on the viewer's perceptions of African Americans. The purpose of this study is to examine how the effects of colorism in television impacts the viewer's perceptions of African Americans. The study analyzes the stereotypic depictions created by colorism in television, as well as gains more insight to its effect in today's society. The relevant theories to this study are the media effects theory, as well as the uses and gratification theory. The methods used to collect relevant data are that there are a lot of colorist depictions. That's wrong. The methods utilized were content analysis and focus groups, but the relevant data that was collected is that there are a lot of colorist depictions that are based on stereotypes that are portrayed in television. These depictions showcase African American men and women in very stereotypical roles and characters. The recommendation is for the directors and others within the television and media industry to start being more equal to lighter and darker actors and actresses. Additionally, both complexions should work with each other rather than against each other, as well as stopping the stereotypes within these roles. And the terms that were used throughout this study and presentation were African American, colorism, effects, and perceptions. Thank you everybody for coming, and thank you Professor Awadia, and thank you to my panelists Raven Quander and Zakiya Mackey.
How did you do?
You less nervous now? Oh, are you less nervous now?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm about to graduate.